Welcome to the Dragon's Den. I am your venerable host Orochi, and today we're going to talk about the only thing that really matters: dragons. Specifically, we're going to go over with another build for Pathfinder 2, and today we are going to make a spell-casting dragon. This is a idea I came up with that's all about doing support, and I figured out a way to put things together to just make a pure support character that can always be there to do variable different things. Hopefully we can go over a nice quick build today. That's not what I wanted right there. And we'll be using Cleric as the base because the Divine font for heals is just ridiculously good for keeping all of your combatants in the fray all day long. Fortune Teller, just because it's charisma based. I'm mostly going to be touching on the things that you need for this build and leaving certain things open for whatever personal customization. The big problem with this build is that we're required to have diplomacy, society, and Arcana. Those are our three skills that we're going to bring to Legendary, and we have to make this build work. So there's little room to choose what skills you want, but your skill feats are up to you, whatever you want through the whole thing. And stats, you want Wisdom to be maxed, and you can either choose to have an above average Charisma to get the Charisma to 5, or start with a higher Dexterity. This is a really bad dexterity to start with, so it will depend on your group if you can get by with a lower dexterity to start with, because this means as a cloistered caster, you're going to have really bad AC, and monsters will put you into the ground fast. So you might want to buff dexterity first and just say you'll get all of these things to +4 instead of... with this that I'm going for, charisma will eventually be +5. So that'll be a personal choice. That depends on your group. And your deity, you can choose any deity you want. I would suggest something. The theme here is we're going with an Amber Dragon. So that means you're going to be a gossiping information broker. So you probably want to choose a god that's more of the information. Maybe if you're going for a darker vibe, like a Vecna kind of thing, and just do dark secret sort of stuff, or choose something that's more lighthearted and upbeat. But that's definitely for you, for your choice, and you can choose whatever you want to get a deity skill and a weapon. You probably won't ever need one, unless you just want to stick with using the Dragon Gods, Apsu, and you can probably get some bonuses to your natural weapons, depending upon what your GM says about that sort of stuff. Otherwise, you might want to get some domain spells, which are open for whatever you want. But we definitely want healing font. I took change shape just so that you can mingle with humanoids better. If, your dragon form might be a little bit off-putting to them, you have a form that you can go out and do all that gossiping and information gathering that will be a cornerstone of this build. And moving forward, reach spell is good, and we definitely want Dragon Mage Dedication, which is going to have to be charisma, which is a little bit unfortunate, and that's why we're buffing our charisma up instead of our dexterity at first, because it'll also help with our diplomacy, because that's something we're going to be good at. Level 3, I almost always choose fleet for every build I make. More speed is just good. It's just really good. Being able to move 30 feet and hope most lower level monsters especially will only be moving 25, so you'll be wasting their actions if you want to move around. This is where we start building our stuff. Gossip lore. This is basically a stand-in for Bardic lore, and it's specific to Amber Dragon, which is why we're Amber Dragons with this build, and it makes it so that you can do all of your lore checks with gossip instead. So you're getting the lowdown from all of the knowledge in the universe from just talking to people constantly, which is a cool kind of idea, and it gives you lots of roleplay opportunities that, you're going into libraries, you're talking to people, and going all over the place and just getting information from every source you can. But we want to have our society maxed out so that we can eventually get this to expert. So that's why we have to lock in society. But I really like that because it's all lore. Any lore, you can always choose the lowest DC of something, the most specific kinds of lore for something whenever you need it. You just won't have the best plus to it. You could max out at a +4, and it also might depend on if your GM will allow you to get like an item that to buff your gossip lore. It's probably a no in most cases, but it might. I would argue that since you can get pluses to nature lore and arcana lore, that you should be able to get pluses to any kind of lore. So that might also depend on your GM, because otherwise you're going to max out at a +4 bonus, whereas otherwise you could have a +8, but it's a +4 in everything. So I think that's really good because DCs can vary by a fair amount, so always being able to target the lowest DC, even if your plus to it isn't the best, is really good. I think it would pan out in your favor more often than not. Which is why you want to boost your intelligence up some, but you might have to sacrifice your constitution for that, which would make you a little bit squishy. This build is a little stretched in too many different directions because normally charisma and intelligence are both non-primary stats, so you have to choose one or the other, but we kind of want both. So if using your charisma skills is more important to you, definitely max out your charisma, because otherwise you can use your spell casting is going off from charisma for your dragon spells, whereas your cleric spells are wisdom. If you don't want to cast any dragon spells that require DCs, like offensive spells or anything like that, you just want to cast buffs and stuff, you could easily just dump charisma and go all into intelligence to get better recall knowledges, but that would also hurt your diplomacy and that sort of stuff, and then you wouldn't be the face character. But if somebody else is already doing that thing, then it's an option for you to consider. And then I couldn't find any good class skills for 4th level because casters don't really have a lot of great class skills. Druids and clerics probably have the most, whereas most other casters have really bad class feats. So I took Breath of the Dragon in this one because that's super good with Dragon Mage. Then we took Rumor Monger. I think this is a rather interesting Amber Dragon feat because you can just start up rumors about things. This basically, especially if you're doing a social campaign, allows you to push narratives on things and get people to think the way you want to think about stuff, which, can be rather scary. Like, it's scary how that sort of thing can work. And then level 6, whatever class feats you want, there's nothing that really stands out as a definite I would take it, so choose whatever you want. If you're using free archetype, definitely take basic mage spell casting, because if you're not using free archetype with this, you might be stretched a little bit thin for some of this stuff, but you could probably fit it all in. You just wouldn't have a lot of extra cool stuff that you would want. Level 7, I almost always take Untrained Improvisation. This sort of cuts into your gossip lore a little bit, but at higher levels, not as much. And it's really good to have your level to everything, because not having it can be really bad. Then Channeled Sucker is pretty good. It's basically, I would say this is probably on par with, if not the best, spell casting feat in the game by a fair large margin, because it allows you to use your your divine your divine font to cast remove curse, remove disease, remove paralysis, or restoration. So that means all of those spells will be heightened to your maximum spell casting, which is the only way that they're any good. So this allows you to always have those spells at the ready and useful. Because that's one of the big problems with counteract checks is, like, if you're not casting it at your highest level, you're probably going to fail it if you're getting negative effects from on-level creatures. So this is amazing because it's so much utility, whereas otherwise you would either be wasting high-level slots or you'd be just like, oh, well, maybe I can cure that thing tomorrow or the day after, which is terrible if if that's just not an option, if you need to keep pushing forward. So this is a stupid good feat. I would say if you're ever building a cleric, never pass this up, ever. It is just too good. And then we're taking Swashbuckler specifically so we can get 1 feat from it. 9, Dragon's Tenacity gives you extra health, it's so good. It's just so freaking good. Especially for squishy casters, just to have more. Then here, we're bumping our Wisdom, Constitution, getting a little bit more Intelligence, because we have our Charisma already at our max, and getting some extra Intelligence. So you could easily just swap those around, so you start with more Dex and lower Intelligence, and then get into Charisma. Like, these 3 are kind of interchangeable depending upon your needs. It's like, if you need more defense, then start with higher Dex. If you want more recall knowledge, start with higher Intelligence. If you want to be your party's face, start with Charisma. And then we're taking One for All. This is what makes you super good at being support, because you can use your diplomacy for all aid checks, meaning your third action in combat after a spell can always be aid with your diplomacy. You want to give plus to hit to an ally? Boom. You just tell them they're doing a great job, and you can give them plus to hit. Out of combat, you want to help with anyone else's skill checks? Boom. One for All does it all. It's stupid good. This is sort of like Swashbuckler defining, in that it just allows you to do so much with diplomacy. And then Breath Magic on its own is pretty garbage, but what it builds into is really good in my opinion. But if you don't like what it builds into, then I would say scrap it. Incredible Initiative at 11. If you don't want the extra speed from Fleet, take this at 3rd level, but Fleet, Untrained Improvisation, and Incredible Initiative are pretty much the 3 general feats that you just need. They're just the best general feats, so take them. Then at level 12, Expert Casting, and I couldn't find any class feats, so I went with Lingering Breath, because Lingering Breath is really good. And then Antipodal Duality, just to get into Draconic Ravager, so eventually we can get Flight for 1 feat, and, it gives you extra attack options, which you'll probably never use, but it's there. Otherwise, you could take, like, Deep Breath or Dive and Breathe, depending upon what you really want. Like, Deep Breath is also an ace choice, so if you don't want Flight for an easy feat, then you could swap this out. And this is what we're going for the breath, for breath magic. Couldn't find any other good class feats for this level, so I suggest this. It's your whole turn, basically, but it allows you to use your breath weapon and cast a spell at the same time. This is a Nova. It's once a day, which sucks, but it's still a pretty damn good Nova. As a cleric, it's probably going to be harder for you to find a really good spell you want to use through your breath weapon, but there are some good ones. Especially if you're fighting evil creatures and stuff. Yeah. Good stuff. And then Draconic Breath just for more spell slots. And Toughness, it's one of the trifecta of good general feats, but I generally don't take it until sometime after 10, because before that, I don't think it gives enough. I mean, numerically as a percentage compared to monster damage, it probably gives you the same effect at every level, but I just like the bigger numbers getting it later, and getting fleet and untrained improvisation are more important at lower levels, I think. And Eternal Blessing at 16. You have Bless on you all the time. This may or may not be a good thing. If you find yourself in rather close range a lot and sticking around your marshals, then that's excellent. Probably going to get yourself killed that way, but you'll buff them. But if you have if you have a good ranged marshal, like a Starspan Magus or something in your group, or a ranger that's doing range damage, or for some weird reason you have a spellcaster in your group that's doing spell attacks, then standing back with Bless on you at all times helps your party out some. But you could easily exchange that for something else. And also at 16, we're just taking wings just so that we can fly. There's other ways to get this, but they're a lot harder. Because this took us 2 feats, Antipodal and Ravager Wings, whereas otherwise it's like 3 Ancestry feats, I think, to get it. So this is kind of the easier way. And then Ride the Breath is just cool, transportation plus damage. And Master Spell Casting. And Echoing Channel is pretty cool. Allows you to get a free casting. It basically makes it so that it's chain heal. You cast the 2 action heal on somebody, and then you can cast the 1 action heal for free on somebody next to you or next to the target of your heal, which is just cool. It's free healing. What's not to love about that? It's kind of a little bit of a high-level feat for what it does, but you're basically casting 2 spells because the 1 action heal is of the same level. So it's pretty good. If you don't get any use out of it, you can easily just retrain it or go for something else. Incredible Investiture, that's just sort of a, if you've got a lot of magic items, then you want that. You can easily trade that out for anything else, though. Then Draconic Metamagician is great because being able to use Lingering Breath and stuff is just, it's super great. If you can find some room, if you don't like some of this other stuff, like Echoing Channel might not be your thing, you should be able to go in here and just pick up Living Breath. Living Breath is also crazy good, especially once you get Draconic Metamagician. Depends on whether you want to be more offense or defense. I would say as a cleric, choosing more options to have better offensive capabilities is probably really good, because I've seen clerics struggle even against undead and stuff, where there's like, oh, well, I only have a few spells that are specifically useful, and I have to make sure that things we're fighting are evil and undead, where there's demons that look undead and they're not. There's certain creatures that look undead but they're not. And so, it's the sort of thing where you have to waste recall knowledge just to make sure that you can cast your alignment-based magic on something without wasting spell slots. So being able to just use your breath weapon instead and have it be decent damage that sticks around from living or lingering breath is really good. It will, of course, require positioning, which will be rough for you, though. But every character should be able to bring offense. Even if you're making a very support-based build, being able to bring some offense is always helpful. And then that's the same reason I brought Meta Magic Channel, just so you can, if you pick up more meta magic for your divine fonts, they'll be instant, which are always great, because then you're not spending your entire turn just meta magicking and doing one spell. But you could probably change that out to something else if you like it. And then our final ability boosts is you want Charisma around 5, Intelligence around, well, at least 4, Intelligence 4, Dex 4, Wisdom 6, and Constitution 4. You want to get as close to those numbers as possible, because that'll give you the most bang for your buck for all of the stuff that you're doing. Because then you'll have good recall knowledge, you'll have good assist everybody with one for all, and you'll have lots of healing magic to back people up and be able to use that healing magic to get rid of all sorts of nasty debilitations, and you'll also have some ability to use offense with your breath weapons. So this is a very rounded support character that can also add to some damage. It requires you to be an Amber Dragon, but I like the look of all the new wild dragons. They're just seem to be very, very social dragons, which is weird for them to be wild dragons, but they're all of them are based around different social aspects. So that may or may not be your thing, but I think if you could easily find a god that you would think, well, what is their typical sort of, character? You could easily play this character as a bard, because you've got a lot of that, helping people out, but also have great healing. And, you don't have to be pushing the word of your god or anything. Or maybe you are. Maybe you're happy-go-lucky and you love trying to teach other people to be happy by embracing your god. There's a lot of cool things that you could do with this and take it in different directions. But yeah, that's a very support-based cleric build of a dragon. And that is all for now. Have a great evening.